Hello YouTube, welcome to the very first hypertrophy Q&A of this channel. This is going to be something that happens 4 times a year, so every 3 months. And we're going to start right away with the questions that were posted underneath the natural Q&A, which is a monthly installment. So these type of Q&As are going to be a little bit longer, so the ones for injuries, nutrition, and hypertrophy, because they happen less frequently. So this is potentially going to be quite long. I'm going to try not to dwell too much on every single question because for the most part, the answers I'm going to give, you could learn more if you watched the channel and checked the playlist. So I'm going to give as clear-cut answers as I can. So, and by the way, before I start, if you want your questions to appear in the next hypertrophy Q&A, you need to post them underneath that video. If they're somewhere else, they're just going to get lost eventually. I cannot keep track of every single video. But anything related to muscle building is welcome and will be answered. Okay, so Balkan Bloc Party sent me a fairly long message on Instagram, and he's basically telling me something that I think a lot of people can relate to. So he's tall. He was relatively skinny when he started, he's put a lot of mass on, but now he's sort of stuck. And he tells me that he always feels like he's overtraining. He tried full body, it didn't work, because he felt like to get enough volume on each full body day, he would need to go way above what his recovery could handle, which a lot of people can relate to. He struggles with how to program frequency and the session volumes. And overall, he has a sense of constant plateauing, which is normal. At some point, we've all experienced that, and that's when you actually start learning about how to avoid these things and how to apply best practices for yourself. So, my advice would be, first, most people who think they're overtraining are actually right for the most part, because what ends up happening to these people is that they get stuck in a mindset of having to do more and more and more because they see the regression and they try to combat it. And what they really are doing when they do that is they feed into that regression, meaning that they are desperately throwing volume at a problem that cannot be solved by it, or at least not the way they do it. A lot of the things that he described, for example, feeling futility during the session, being afraid to decline, having to balance improvement on strength and volume on accessories, etc. These are things that to me show that there is still too much of a focus on strength progression. And you will find that if your goal is hypertrophy, this is not a good focus to have. You want to get stronger, not necessarily to have bigger numbers, but because the bigger numbers are going to feed into more tonnage. And in reality, most of that tonnage is going to trickle down into the variations and accessories. It's not going to be coming from the strength work. So first off, that's first part. Detach yourself emotionally from the results of the strength work. Even if, for example, your squat, your pure row squat, doesn't progress for 3 months, it's not the end of the wood, because other lifts could be progressing. Now, if you tell me that every single knee flexion is either plateauing or regressing, now that's an issue. But for the most part, that's not what people experience. They experience a lack of progression on their bench, squat, and deadlift, and they just realize that it's not terrible, it's not an issue, because you can get the tonnage from somewhere else. So that would be the first thing. When you look at your day, for example, a daily session, look at how much tonnage you get from each section of the program. If most of the tonnage comes from strength work, meaning the first exercise you do with the highest intensity, you need to rethink your program, because the issue is if you plateau, your tonnage is going to be bled dry. And when that happens, your progression is being bled dry. What is hurting your progress is not the fact that you cannot get the strength numbers up, is that since they don't go up, nothing goes up because you're too obsessed on that one thing. And there's also the fact that, as he tells me here, he's struggling, which is fine, we all struggle, but he also feels inside like he shouldn't be. And he thinks that way because he looks at strength standards and he sees that he's not advanced, and therefore that justifies not being allowed to struggle. Unlearn that behavior, unlearn those patterns. it is not applicable to you. The reason why is, one, most of the strength standards on the internet, you cannot rely on them because they're just usually user-based polls, meaning that it's people who don't prove their lifts, who enter their lifts and it makes a standard, or they come from powerlifters, meaning people who train for that. From what I know, you don't train for that. Right? I think you told me you're 180 and you benched 230. That's a decent bench for someone who's 180. It's not super good, but it's a decent bench. And that opens up a lot of possibilities for hypertrophy. Instead of focusing so much on that 230 bench, do some accessory and variations with 180, 190. That's still a body weight bench. It's going to make massive differences in your physique if you can accumulate the volume. And as far as the type of split, you tried full body, it didn't work. I think the reason why it didn't work for you was that, and that's going to be true for a lot of people, your ability to recover from the workout is lesser than your ability to recover from the baseline strength demands of the workout. Meaning that you're the type of person that potentially is going to be very able to do a ton of volume of bench on one day, but then if I told you to do the same thing 3 days later, you wouldn't be able to. So you have a very good work capacity, but you don't have a good work recovery. For people like you, the workaround is usually going to be to not reach that extra mile of volume that is going to make you feel overtrained. And it might be a struggle. It might be a struggle because you're going to want to, because your body within the session will have the ability to. You go back to baseline easily, but then you don't recover. So there's no point. So what I would say is, and you already did it, you don't do full body. It's not good for people like you. People like you should do the opposite. You should focus on training splits that are going to be much more specific, and you might have to up your frequency. It might sound counterintuitive because you might think, well, if my recovery is bad, why do I up the frequency? You up the frequency because as you do that, you're going to be able to hit different body parts on each day, meaning that you're still going to get the overall stimulus, but you're going to have the ability to give yourself more time. When you think about it, you hit your full body and you destroy the entire body and you try 3 days later to do it again and you can't because you're overtrained. If you had split the body parts that you hit on that full body, you could still have trained for 3 days. The sessions, the total amount of time spent on the session would be the same as the time you spent for that full body, but you would recover better. Why? Because on day 1, you hit that body part, and by the end of the split, day 3, that body part had 2 days to recover by itself. So it had 1 full day where your body could just focus on it, and then 2 days where you hit other body parts, but with lesser amounts of volume. So it still had that ability to gorge a lot of macronutrients, of oxygen, and therefore you will be recovered. That's why when you tell me that you're doing an upper lower now, I think it's a good thing because the upper lower is going to allow you to really target certain portions. So what I suggest you do is you do your upper lower as a template, and then within the upper lower you make a selection. I don't want to see you do chest and upper back on the same day on the upper lower, because clearly that's the type of things that are going to put you in a hole. So you're going to be more specific. Maybe one day you'll be doing chest, triceps, and shoulders. And that way, by minimizing the amount of muscle hit, you're going to maximize the frequency, if that makes sense. And by doing so, you're also going to be able to test your recovery abilities within the frequency of the week. And maybe you might even be able to do an extra chest work at some point during the week on an upper day, but you will be able to tell because you won't have overreach, so you'll have a little bit more in the tank. So that would be my advice to you. I think that a lot of people who stress out about regressing, they end up doing too much and it feeds into the regression. Take a step back, right? Keep doing your strength work, and you know what? Maintain the strength work. Don't even try to progress on it. Actively try to stagnate. You will notice that when you trigger plateaus, you control them. So trigger the plateau, stay on the strength work with the same tonnage, and then build around it. See what type of variations work, see how much volume works within the premises of the template I told you to follow. And I think that this would really help you. It would get you out of that rut. Because once you unlock that knowledge of your own body, you're going to find that those plateaus won't happen as frequently at all. And this also will help of the feeling of balancing improvement on strength and doing volume on accessories. Your focus should be the volume on accessories. Don't even try to focus on the strength. Stabilize it and then raise the tonnage with the rest of the program. Okay, after that we have Garfielf, who tells me that he's 18, 5'10", 175, he's a rugbyman. He needs to be 200 next year for his next season. Okay, first off, I'm going to question that assessment. Why do you need to be 200 for your next season? Did your coach tell you that you won't make the roster if you're not 200? That seems to be like a lot of weight to gain. 25 pounds is a lot of weight. It won't be muscle, I can tell you that right now. Especially by next season. I don't know when it starts, but if it starts in 4, you won't make it. And then you tell me that COVID made the club cancel, which is normal. So you ramped up strength and hypertrophy training, so you're going to have more time to bulk up, is what I get. And you do a 5-day push-pull leg split, okay? And you have limited equipment at home, but you manage to get some mass increase even with that. So your main question is, you're worried that you're going to lose the speed and agility that made you in the set in the first place. It might do it, it might. That being said, I've always found that for people who train for athletics, you should train for athletics, of course, or you should do strength training, of course, but you should always match the results you get with your specific training, meaning that you should be able to know if you're regressing in speed, for example, because you should be testing your speed. You should be testing your ability with agility drills. All of these, you should be timing them to see if you're regressing on them, if you're getting sloppier, and if you are, you have to weight that against the potential strength that you're going to get. Especially with a sport like rugby, where I don't know which position you're playing, but if you're playing arrière, I mean, they're not really looking for you to be a massive beast. You have guys on the team that are supposed to do that. They'll be slower, but they'll be the battering rams of the team. So you tell me that you want to know if you should be focusing on gains and cut down a bit before the season starts, or should you change your current routine for a more balanced athletic training with the risk that you won't make the goal weight? Again, I question the goal weight. I don't know why you want to hit that weight, especially at 18. I've seen that happen when I was playing football. Guys who wanted to reach a certain weight at all costs, and it always backfired. You will eventually be 5'10", 200 pounds. You will. This is a completely reasonable strength number to shoot for, weight number to shoot for. But it might not happen immediately. You might wait until you're 20, 21 to reach that. So I don't know why you're trying to get in that weight. I do think that focusing on hypertrophy during your first off season is a good call, because more muscle is always good. But I think that your second choice is the best. You shouldn't focus on hypertrophy and just become a gym bro and then return to rugby, because you're going to be sluggish, you'll have lost your sense for the sport. So you really should be doing a balanced athletic training with the training that you do in the gym, because when the season starts again, I know that we tend to cut down on hypertrophy and just strength training as athletes when we are within the season, and that's nice and all, but I've always found that you should maintain some of that. So I don't want you to go from doing only strength training and zero athletic training to then during the season doing only athletic training and zero strength training. I think it's too all or nothing. You should right now focus mainly on hypertrophy, but still test your performance with the athletics. And then during the season, you're going to have your practice with the team. You won't have as much energy. When that happens, you're going to do mostly athletics, and you still need to maintain a little bit of work in the gym, maybe 2 or 3 hours a week, just to get those gains stabilized. And that way you also keep progressing, because right now you're focusing on this season, but if you want to play that sport for a while, you're going to have another season next year, and then another one, and you need to slowly progress. This is also why I said no point in trying to be 200 now. You're going to slowly gain, and it will even be better for you as a rugbyman. Okay, after that we have Montana, who asks, do you think a ton of forearm curls and extensions 5x20 at the end of every workout would get you big forearms? Yes, because it would be nucleus overload in a sense. 5x20 is the type of rep range that you would pick, because if you're able to do 5x20, most likely, unless you really take a lot of time in between, you're not really challenging yourself because you're able to hit the same number of reps every time. As far as forearm curls and extensions, I think that they are very important for the size of your forearms. That being said, in terms of recovery, it's something I explained in the nucleus overload videos. Forearms might not be the best muscle group to target with that type of training because you need your forearms for a lot of things. And people think about back, well, you can use straps for that. But I mostly think about stuff that you're not going to use straps on, like bicep work, even some vertical pulls. All of these, you need the forearm. And if they're always tired, it might hurt your progression. So I don't think that doing it every workout would be a good idea unless you train maybe 3 times a week, in which case it would be okay. I would say to be careful with that. A lot of people get wrist pain with wrist extensions, and that is recipe for pretty bad tendinitis to do that much volume on it. I do think that it's doable though. However, I would recommend you don't do them at the end of the workout because you're going to find that you're just going to skip them. You can superset them. And usually I encourage people to be synergistic with their supersets and especially their training. But for something like the wrist curl, I would advise the opposite actually. Do your wrist curl at the end of a bench, like an horizontal press or a squat. That way they're not tired and you can just focus on that muscle group while you rest. Right? Superset them, don't waste your time. And because you superset them, you will have to do them because they're not at the end of the workout, they're in between sets. So that's that. Jack Jones asks, do you think strapless deadlifts actually help forearm hypertrophy? I know big dude in my gym who can deadlift 600 pounds, but they have lagging forearms. Strapless deadlifts are going to help with forearm hypertrophy, yes, because they are a type of forearm exercise. It's an isometric hold. So yes, it will grow the forearm. What portion of the forearm? I would mostly say the top of the forearm. That being said, and that's maybe a little bit controversial, if you think about it, what is the difference between grabbing a bar with straps and grabbing a bar with your grip? Because at the end of the day, your hand is still closed on it, the weight is still stretching on it. Most of it is you struggling to not let your fingers open. So it's a grip exercise mostly. And pure grip exercises are not going to be the best for forearm size. At least for people who are not either massive, so like 300-pound strongmen, or people who are not grip strength specialists who at the end of the day only train their forearms. At least 90% of their training is their forearm and their grip, so of course they'll have big forearms. For you, you don't have that time. So I would say get as much forearm stimulus as you can from a double overhand grip on the deadlift, and the second you can't grab it anymore, put on straps. But don't rely only on the deadlift to build big forearms because as you said, there's a ton of guys who pull a lot of weight and they have bad forearms. A good example is someone like Pete Rubbish. He doesn't have stick forearms, but for someone who deadlifts 800 pounds, you would think he would have bigger forearms. Same for Carlo Woolen. Carlo Woolen deadlifts 900 pounds, he has stick for forearms. At the end of the day, it's not going to guarantee big forearms, you really need to be isolating them. The deadlift, remember, the deadlift is a posterior chain exercise, it's not a forearm exercise. Nour Mohamed asks, what squat and deadlift variations are good for carryover to the conventional lifts? Well, squat and deadlift variations, it's all up to you, right? The type of stuff that you like and that you're going to be doing on a weekly basis. But for me, my favorites, I always find that the more specific you stay, the better it is. The best squat accessory for me is a post squat. It just builds strength where you need it on the squat. It also teaches you to go down in the hole and not be afraid because if you can pose it and get it up, then it will build confidence in your ability to actually get it up no matter what happens. And for the deadlift, it's a little bit different. Some people will tell you a posed deadlift. I've always found that the best accessory for the deadlift is just more deadlift. It's a little bit simplistic, but I always found that grabbing a weight that you can rep comfortably for 3 reps, and at the end of your massive intensity peak of the deadlift, doing 4 sets of 3 reps on that is going to be the best thing you can do for your deadlift. If you're talking variations, some people like deficits, some people like block pulls, it's really up to you. I don't have a number one best. But for the most underrated and non-specific quote-unquote variation lifts for both, I would say the good morning for the squat is massively underrated and works super well. And for the deadlift, something that I think works really well too is a certain type of box squat that is done with a safety squat bar because of the angle of the back and the height of the hips when you get it up. Some people call it the Lehman box squat. Lehman didn't do it with an SSB. I do it with an SSB. I think it's amazing for that. You can check the Road to Bigger Legs playlist if you want to see that in action. Mohamed also asks, at what point in strength would you be doing push-ups in your novice, in your program, he wrote novice, redundant? That's a good question, and it's a question that has to do with ability to go back to baseline and intensity ratios. So basically, when you start training your chest, you're weak. So doing push-ups is actually a good thing. Why? Because it's super intense. You can barely do 5 or 6. So that's the perfect exercise for you. And it's at a point where, for novices, push-ups are going to be just as effective as bodyweight dips, and they're going to be just as effective as doing barbell bench with an empty bar. But the more you progress, the more the push-up falls behind, and the more the weighted exercises get better. Why? Because you can actually load the weighted exercise. That's the entire point. You cannot load a push-up. So for a push-up, for example, you're going to end up feeling that what makes you stop is not necessarily just muscular failure, it's the failure of the system. It's just the pump becomes uncomfortable, you have a weak link in the chains, for example, your triceps that just gives up even though the shoulders and the pecs could keep pushing. So the more you progress, the more you should really be doing weighted stuff. And that includes weighted push-ups if you want to, but I've made a video about it. They're not as good as the dip and the bench for me in terms of how doable they are. Because how do you actually load a weighted push-up when you're alone? Even if someone is there, it's going to be cumbersome. So it's easier to do dips or bench. But even if you do dips or bench, you shouldn't give up on push-ups because the ability to move your body is key. I believe that. I forgot that a while ago and I regretted it. You still need to be doing your push-ups. But you're a little bit more advanced now, so they're not as tiring, right? So what is the point? Well, there's a point if you can actually schedule the program in a way where the push-ups happen at the end, because your muscles are going to be super tired. So the push-ups are now artificially higher in the intensity rep range, magically, quote unquote, because you are tired and your muscles are tired. And by doing that, you're also going to shoot your baseline ability to recover, which is usually a bad thing, but now it's a good thing because you're going to find that if you do a big bench day or a big dips day, any horizontal press basically, and you do push-ups at the end, first set of push-ups you might get 35, second 29, and then 21. You basically are not able to replicate the effort, and that's good because it means that the exercise you're doing is effective. Is it as effective as the strength work you did at the start of the workout? No, it's still effective. If you had started with push-ups, you would have found that you might have gotten 45 or 50 on the first set, and then 48, and then 46. And the reason why is because your muscular endurance is still up there. So the push-up is not really damaging the muscle fibers at all. It's not as effective. So I hope that makes sense. And that also applies to a lot of other lifts that some people consider to be completely useless for non-novices, but you can actually keep using them. And I think that push-ups, for example, are very underrated for chest development because you can really play around with the width of the hands. Russian name, and I'm sorry I cannot pronounce your name because it's in Russian. He asks, you have a video with bodyweight exercises on the rings. Can you tell about ring training and hypertrophy? So this is going to be something I'm going to start talking about more on the channel. It's the technicality to hypertrophy ratio. A lot of lifts are going to be extremely good for hypertrophy. The issue is that they are too technical, meaning that the amount of time and effort you're going to have to invest to be good at them and be able to start using them for hypertrophy is just not worth it, because you could have just invested that time in doing regular stuff that would have gotten you just as big. And it's not even like it's a long-term investment. Like you spend some time like grinding the learning curve and then it actually pays dividends. It doesn't. It really doesn't. And rings is one of these things where you hear people say, well, gymnasts have massive biceps, so I'm going to train like a gymnast, I'm going to get massive biceps. The issue is that those people don't get that the gymnast gets the massive biceps by virtue of being amazing on the rings. They didn't train to have massive biceps, it just happened, right? So it's like a rock climber. The rock climber climbs and eventually he gets muscular. Did he care about that muscularity? No. He just wanted to get better at climbing, and by default, when that happens, you get more muscular because you develop the muscles that help you climb. It's the same for the gymnast. So that is for the people who think that they're going to be able to achieve the bicep size of the gymnast. You won't, because to be able to get that, you would have to be able to do the feat that they do, and you won't, because gymnasts are usually small, they usually don't train their legs, so it's for their sport, but you won't fit those characteristics. And also, you didn't start training as a gymnast as a kid, most of them do. So that's that one thing that I need to absolutely say about rings, because I don't want people to buy them and then realize that it was all for nothing. That being said, the good thing about rings is it's a bodyweight movement. And it's a bodyweight movement with an implement that is very easy on the wrist, is easy to move, you can move the height, and it's easy to learn, meaning that it's super tough to master, but any idiot can learn how to use rings because it's just natural. You're grabbing a ring. So I would say that for people who train only for hypertrophy, get you some rings. You're going to find that you're going to be super weak at them, but you can actually manipulate every single movement that the gymnasts do to be 100 times easier, and that's going to be good for hypertrophy in the same vein as push-ups can be good for hypertrophy. The only difference is that the rings are going to work your stabilizer muscles more, and you're going to find that the range of motion can be modified. Between a push-up and a ring push-up, the ring push-up is harder, but it's also better for chest hypertrophy because you can go much deeper with a better stretch and without hurting the shoulders as well, because you can manipulate the wrist and elbow angles. So that would be my opinion on rings. And also, rings for most people are going to be the only implement that allows them to do horizontal pulls without just grabbing a barbell. And horizontal pulls with body weight are underrated. You need to give them a try. They are really something. And I will eventually make a video just talking about rings, but that's that for today. And I think that we're going to stop here. And the other questions I'm going to keep for the next Q&A on hypertrophy. So that's that. Thank you a lot for watching. Any questions, put them underneath. I will personally copy paste the questions that I want to see at the top of the list for the next Q&A underneath. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.